to Marin Poets Live. I'm Neshama Franklin. I work at the Fairfax Library and I love poetry. After this program airs on TV, it will appear on the Marin Free Library website as part of a digital archive, which also features biographies of the poets and links to our collection. Today we are featuring poet David Watts. Welcome, David.
Glad to be here.
So glad you're here at last. And I always ask for a Marin poem, but I bet you have something else up your sleeve that will be congruent, if not Marin.
Well, Marin has a great mountain in it, and I have a poem about mountains, so I thought I'd start with that. It's a poem that I actually wrote up at Squaw Valley Community of Writers in Squaw Valley, but it has a thematic element that I hope you will enjoy. It's called The Woman I Loved in Mountains. The woman I loved in mountains was not the woman she was 20 years before, nor was I what I was. Only by this ripening could we be penetrated with enough pleasure to last this long. We should not have been first lovers. My molecules replaced themselves in just a few years, yet I am called by the same name. I love the same woman, though she too has changed. We are not the castle, but the ghosts in its rooms. Consciousness, not my electrons spinning, but the smoke from fires they burn, rising. What rises from wood fire is not the fire or the wood, but new properties of lift and motion. The old molecules not around to hold their shape. What holds me in place is not my name or what I do, but what I love and what loves me. The woman from mountains sits across the table. She holds a spoon in her delicate hand. The light from the open window that illuminates her is light that has never been in this world before. We are rising from ourselves.
That's very interesting, very slippery, because it moves. You know, I've heard a lot of poems that talk about the beauties of nature, and you are all over the place with that. You're with science and with philosophy, and also when you bring it home at the very end to something we can all breathe comfortably with, the spoon, the table, the hand, and the time.
Well, there's a little philosophy of poetry that some of the poems like to end on the mundane. Mm-hmm. And so I think after you've spent a little time out in the wilderness, so to speak, to come back home again helps to anchor the thoughts.
And that indeed it did.
Oh, good.
What do you have next?
Well, let's see. I made a selection. These are poems that are out of a new collection of mine. I have old books too, but I wanted to read new stuff. So this is a poem called Inheritance. My father is made of dust and intelligence. He holds the barn together with road signs, Grey Pet, Lucky Strike, Burma Shave, rusty foundlings cobbling slats together like stitches in a fence. He preaches Jesus. He whistles Turkey in the Straw. Mother is made from music and culture. She bakes bread, opens her tilted uterus for 2 sons. She plays 5'2" on the ukulele. She is a long way from Laredo. They made me out of farming and music, embryo with 2 lines tangled, hatched like a confounded chicken with a tune in its head. So it happens the barn hums old melodies, names and notes, and the cotton rows get counted as beats in a measure like Mozart, while the combine whistles a shed full of arias. My father shows me harrow, windmill, horse trough. Already he knows I will take them in my world as a different idea. He knows inheritance is like jumping through smoke. He listens for what I hear. The forest hums. Even the Johnson grass squeaks as it grows.
What an intense biography. And I wanted to take every line and ask you about all that stuff. But you did have a rural upbringing, obviously.
I did, yes.
And yet there must have been a lot of more stuff going than just the barn and the cotton.
Oh my, yes. Well, my father grew up in West Texas out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
And they had, I mean, there were 4 people in his class at school. He walked to school, you know, that old story of a mile to school and back again in the snow, that sort of thing. And so I wanted to celebrate his upbringing and the history of the family.
Yes.
And so when I wrote the poem about inheritance, I tried to compress into as small a space possible little ideas which resonated through the entirety of their history.
That you did in spades.
Well, thanks.
But now I have to ask about the tilted uterus. Does that mean you and your sibling had a really difficult birth?
Well, my mother did have what was called in those days a tilted uterus, and they told her she would never be pregnant. And so it was a surprise and a blessing, I hope, that she got pregnant and had me and my brother.
Yes, that's great. That's wonderful. Another one, please.
Okay. So this is another poem that I wrote at Squaw Valley. And it has a form which happened accidentally. The first stanza came out in 3 lines, and the second of the 3 was longer than the first or the third. And so I just kept that going all the way through. You won't be able to see it very much in my voice, but perhaps we can show the page. It's called The Delicate Sprigs of Love. He is sitting next to her. The firmness of her thigh is pressed against his. There's no light between them. He listens so heavily to the heartbeat of her that he hears the murmuring of aspens on the hillside. He tells her this. How could he sit next to her if he didn't tell her this? She is beautiful in the manner in which there is so much beauty it almost cancels itself. I can lie down in the golden shape of your shadow, he says, and no longer question myself. She wonders if they were just prisoners of the freedom that brought them there, or if to love him would mean waiting for promises lying awake in the draft of crossing stars. They kiss, and though he is still alone in the fear that no one will ever kiss him, he is sitting next to her.
That's it.
That's it.
The conjunction and the fear simultaneously,
Yes.
and the fact that there's no space between them.
Well, that's how it is in life.
Yeah.
Things don't get completely resolved.
Oh,
In the resolution, there's always a bit of the continuation of the problem.
yeah.
And so here he is getting a kiss and thinking, I'm never going to get another kiss.
So I'm presuming we're talking in Love, Love, Love about the same woman.
Well, you
Ah,
know,
are
yes,
we?
of course. But it's,
Not
I
the
think
same woman.
universally though, when writing, obviously I write the poems that have to do with my love. But I try to make them spread deeply enough and general enough so that people will identify with them within their own lives.
Definitely, definitely. But was this an early love that you got married or got together early and it stayed with you? And I'm not trying to dig into your personal life, but is this a long love?
It was early in my second life.
In your second life, excellent. Okay,
Yes.
that's all you need to say.
It was perfect, I have to say that.
Okay. Okay, and when you talk about the accident of the long line, I really believe there are no accidents.
I agree with that. I just looked up after that first stanza and I said, well, I should keep this going. And I showed it to Bob Hass, and he said, have you ever seen this form before? And I said, no. He thought it was a wonderful poem. I am glad that he did. But also, I kind of like the idea that it strikes out in its form that seems organic to itself.
Yes, yes. Another poem, please.
All right. Let's see what I have coming up next. Now, I had a brother, as you may know from the previous poem. He died a few years ago. He died in the same month that I was having, my wife was delivering our first child. So one soul was leaving and the other was arriving in the same month. And so as I was celebrating the birth of the child and mourning the loss of the brother, I wanted to write a poem about him, to honor him in some way.
Yeah.
But everything that I wrote was awful. It was full of sentimentality and unfulfilled emotional structures. And so I trashed it. And then I was reading a few poems, and I came across this poem in which there was the identity of the lost person as the body of that person. And I realized that what was happening is that opened up the possibility of separating oneself from the deep anguish and being able to process it at a level which was fit for poetry. And so I sat down to write this poem, and 3 times in my life a poem has come fully formed. That is to say, I had to write it faster and faster and faster because it was going to go away if I didn't get it on the page quickly. And this was one of them. And it has changed not one iota since the time that I put it on the page. The body of my brother. First it belonged to my mother, or seemed to, stuffed into her like a foot in a sock. Then it took care of itself, filling out into high jumps, home runs. There were times it must have been afraid, hiding in a bunker in South Vietnam, having happened to it, whatever it was that makes bodies years later leap out of bed in the middle of the night, not awake, sweating and shouting. Last time I saw it, it was older than mine, thinned out by too many cigarettes and favors given. Now they've taken it from the hospital bed where it gasped out its last punchline and put it in a box that no one will ever see again. Though we stand around it, observing gestures even death cannot remove. Head tilt, wry smile, hands the same as my hands, crossed over his chest as they never were in life. A few pictures and mementos scattered around it as if they were crumbs of a happy life.
I really got him. Especially the punchline.
Punchline.
Yes.
That was very much about him.
Right. And it's so interesting. You have to remove yourself from those primitive emotions are very pathetic.
You get entangled.
And yeah. And so that one step aside.
One step aside, thinking of it as a body of the brother rather than the person of the brother.
Exactly.
Allowed you to bring in the person in a way which it was not distorted in bad ways.
That's very rich and beautiful.
Thank you.
Yes. Another one. I just want him coming.
All right, and then do you want to do a little Harvey Ellis after that?
Well, you have to, you do your poem and then you have to say you want to do a little Harvey Ellis and tell us what's that about.
We'll do that. So this is a new poem called The Man at the Window. He stands at the window baffled by pleasure and how brief it is. Pleasure followed by the memory of pleasure, light, then dark, with a splinter of light left in, like that. The woman in the chair is reading, drinking tea in the ground glass haze of evening. The sudden swell of pleasure he feels watching her illuminates the past she spent getting to this place. A lover who left, perhaps, time spent setting her kitchen in order or gathering artichokes from the field. The moment he is in opens in a diorama of impermanence, seeping away at the edges even as it is apprehended the first time. He holds out his arms. He wants to take in this moment into his body and feel it there, the pleasure it holds. And then what pleasure leaves behind, which is all he can keep. It will be enough, as that strange quality of light that took him in dissolves like smoke in air, slipping away into the sun's diminishing gaze.
That's such a juggling act. I think of one foot on the ground and the other foot on the rowboat, and they're moving away from each other.
That's a good image.
Right. But the diorama of what was it?
Impermanence.
Impermanence. And the idea that you can put it in the shoebox, but the old diorama of our grade school days. And it's impossible to hang on to any of this stuff.
Well, you know, we try to find ways to make language work and do a sort of an increased horsepower of working.
Yes.
And imagery is one of those ways. And that image hopefully accomplished what you
It did it.
said it did.
It did it very, very well.
Good.
And let me just back up before we get Harvey with us.
Yeah.
You had mentioned something about healing and poetry,
Yes.
healing and writing. And so I bet in the poem about your brother there was a deep healing for you.
Oh,
Perhaps.
yes. Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Well, I think after major events like that, we are never the same people again. But we can avoid being destroyed by it. By partially, I think, just the recovery that takes place naturally, but also by working with it in some way that processes it into our consciousness in a way that's acceptable.
Yeah.
And to make a celebration out of the loss,
Yes.
isn't that how life is? It's not all bright, it's not all dark.
Definitely, which of course that last poem just
Some
is
of the best
shot
lines-
through with that.
Some of the best lines in poetry have both the bright side and the dark side contained within them.
Right.
Therefore, we believe them because it's close to reality. Yes, poetry is a very healing process. There are actually organic things that change in the body. Immune system, nervous system improves with the use of language and poetry and writing.
Right. Now we haven't mentioned, I know that you are a doctor, so he knows of what he speaks. We don't have to beat this into the ground, but it's lovely to have all the disciplines come and feed your poetry like that.
Well, the marriage of science and art is one which is wonderful because they both strengthen each other.
Yes.
And they both have some of the same techniques, observation, intelligence, things like that.
Yeah.
So do you want to do a little Harvey Ellis?
I know it's time for Harvey
Harvey
Ellis.
Ellis.
You better reach for the hat.
I
know
am
there's a
going
hat.
to. Well, you know, this is the thing. People want to know, why do I write as Harvey Ellis? And what I've been reading to you is what might be called narrative poems, because they have a thematic element that follows all the way through, a little story that goes inside the poem. And most people, when they come to poetry, like the narrative because it gives them a structure to hold on to. And yet there's more to poetry than that kind of structure. There is this sort of associative thinking, this free-range association that occurs sometimes. The subconscious mind that wants to bubble up into the consciousness and we keep suppressing it.
Yeah.
So I became very fascinated with that whole idea of writing from the subconscious. And so I created this alter ego by the name of Harvey Ellis. Harvey is my father's first name. Ellis is my mother's maiden name. And so what I did was to find a transitional state in which I thought I'm not sure what I was doing, but I thought I was accessing the subconscious. And so when things would pop up into the brain, I would put them onto the page without editing whatsoever, because they are from a different place. And that different place has its own narrative, has its own logic, its own way of doing things. And so I wrote these things and I had no idea anybody would ever pay any attention to them because they were from my unconscious. But 2 books have been published in Harvey Ellis's name, so somebody likes them well enough to publish it. All right, so I'm going to give you a little Harvey Ellis. And to do this, I have to get in costume.
I figured.
Yeah, because...
And it sounds, I haven't heard the poems yet, but I hear jazz.
Yes.
Ooh, you know, just those lines that come out.
There's jazz, there's quirkiness,
Yeah.
and there's that whole business of free association.
Yes.
All right,
Okay.
so here we go with a little Ellis.
All right. I'm ready.
All right. Mr. Ellis, come forward. Health. She calls from the health food store buying acidophilus and perplexed by the numbers. How much should I take, she asks. Some, I say, pleased by my accuracy. Well, they have this super high potency one that's supposed to contain billions. Well, let's do billions, I say, thinking of the awkward organisms swimming inside her. She laughs. Okay, billions, she says.
That's great. That's charming.
And he goes back and forth. He has a sense of humor. he has a depth and a quirkiness, and he has a sense of spirituality. So this is one of those ancestors. My ancestors surround me like walls of a canyon, quiet, stone hard. Their ideas drift over me like breezes at sunset. We gather sticks and make settlements. What we do is only partly our own and partly continuation down through the chromosomes. My son, my baby, sleeps behind me, stirring in the night for the touch that lets him continue. He is arranging in his small form the furniture and windows of his home. It will be a lot like mine. It will be a lot like theirs.
Yeah. And so you just put on your Harvey hat, metaphorically, and the pen hits the paper or the fingers hit the computer and out this stuff pours?
I tried a lot of different ways. The best is to wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning,
Oh, yeah.
not turn on a light, write in the dark without watching what you're writing. Because there's always a danger that the editor's going to come in and
That's right.
squelch it.
The famous free write.
It's
which
a free
is a
write,
technique.
but it is
Yeah.
also in a state of consciousness at the border of sleep and wakefulness.
Oh, yes.
And that is more open to unconscious thought.
Right, the dreams are pushing up.
They're pushing up.
I'll tell you about 5 minutes, so I don't know whether you want Harvey to ride off into the sunset or you want to bring back David. Your choice.
I tell you what, let's do 2 quick Harveys and then
Okay.
we'll do a David.
Okay.
Geese. My children have risen from me like geese on their perfect path. They soar and tilt against the current without effort visible from the ground. I am struck by their beauty, how easily they know the motions to carry them over mountains, how they seem to need no apology, how I want to give them one.
Yeah.
And then this one, it's called February 14th. You make my cheeks tingle, she said, pointing inside to the wet membranes wet with electrical rain clouds. And I imagined electrons bumped loose from their secure orbits to shift through the fenestrated distance to the next little solar system, spreading charges of anticipation through the membrane. It made me want to kiss her again just to see what would happen. But she drew a little bit away, closing her lips over the activated mouthful, as if savoring saffron or sage, her breath ionic and her skin the candlelight of softness.
Ooh. You have so much fun as Harvey Ellis.
He's fun.
And now I'm so curious which David will come forth after that romp.
Well, let's see. Shall we read one more? It's
One more, yes.
I'll tell you what. I will recite one.
Good.
It's sort of it was one of the other poems that came fully formed. I had exhausted myself writing poems. I thought I had nothing left. And I got to this point sitting out on a deck, and I remembered my son having brought me a rock the week before, and this poem just went. My son brings me a stone and asks which star it fell from. He is serious, and so I must be careful. Even though I know he will place it among those things that will leave him someday, and he will go on gathering. For this is one of those moments that turns suddenly towards you, opening as it turns, as if for an instant we paused on the edge of a heartbeat and then pressed forward, conscious of the fear that runs beside us and how lovely it is to be with each other in the long, resilient mornings.
I love the rockness of it, the denseness, the specificity of it, and the seriousness, the beauty of and of a kid's question, which is just so full of amazement.
Yeah, the kids have it all.
Right, and the fact that it came to you after a long dry period, because you know you don't know what's going on underneath those long dry periods, and it could be a kind of pressure cooker.
It's a storing up, I think.
Yeah, exactly. We actually have just a few more minutes, so you want to give me another, or was that it?
Do you want one more?
One more.
All right, I'll read you an old poem that is about my father. Words. My father used few words. He moved fearless from task to task, as if they were meals to be eaten. Our house grew inglenooks from the imagination of the carpenter he became. From tree limbs of summer I watched him tote and saw, driving nails with the same muscles that lost baseballs over West Texas outfields. Leaves turned, snow fell. All that whiteness came. Standing in the emptiness of transition, he spoke, imploring wisdom. Then, when the inkwell went dry, he reached with great and somber hands to turn out the light.
I think it's wonderful to bring your father here for our farewell, because it's so sweet and serious. It's what you sprang from. You sprang from fully formed with all this stuff going on. It's just been an absolute joy. Thank you, David.
Well, life is rich. It's good to be here. Thank you.